Two Mexican police officers investigate an abandoned house in Mexico City and become increasingly disturbed by it as they see it has been used for satanic rituals and sacrifices. They see the remains of dead animals, but what is worse, they see the skeletal remains of a human. The police officers become spooked and try to walk out, but are caught by a menacing group that says they are beyond the police, and their bullets won't stop them. They capture the police officers, and then proceed to brutally torture them, cutting one of the police officers' forearm in half. They continue to chop and hack at them until they are dead. A group of college student friends called Ed, Phil, and Henry hang around drinking at a beach with other friends and decide to go to Mexico to party. At first, Ed needs encouragement from Henry and reluctantly goes along. They reach a town on the Mexican border and stop to have drinks at a strip club. Phil works himself up to have sex with a prostitute, but he is nervous because he is a virgin. Henry chats up some women, and Ed takes an interest in the lady working behind the bar. Ed walks over to the lady behind the bar and talks to her, when another man starts to grab her hand and offer her money. She just ignores him and turns her back, but he grabs her by her hair. She tells him to let her go, and she swings back around and slaps him hard on his face. Ed turns to him and tells him to chill out. Valeria, the lady behind the bar, defensively says to Ed that she can handle it. Then the man turns his aggression onto Ed, asking him if he thinks he can handle Valeria. Ed asks what his problem is, and then the man cuts him on his abdomen with a knife. Valeria runs around the bar and comes up behind the man and hits him over his back with a bar stool. Valeria takes care of his cut on his stomach and says that he will have a great story to tell his friends that he came to the aid of a poor and defenseless woman. Ed laughs in disbelief because he saw her handle herself well. Phil goes into a room with the prostitute, and he is nervous as he sits on the bed, and she kneels in front of him. Suddenly, her baby cries from the corner, and he is surprised she has a child. They don't have intercourse, but Phil goes over to her as she comforts her daughter, and she hands her to him. The next day, the boys are having lunch together, and Henry makes fun of Phil for falling for a hooker and makes fun of Ed for getting into a fight over a barmaid. Henry looks up and asks Ed if that is his barmaid from last night. It is, and Valeria introduces her cousin, Lupe, to them. They all hang out, and later that night, decide to try some hallucinogenic mushrooms while attending the fun fair. Ed is hesitant, but Valeria encourages him, and he takes some too. They go on the bumper cars, on various rides, and they all feel the effects of the mushrooms. They laugh and have fun. Phil has to go to the toilet, but it is occupied. He speaks in Spanish, annoyed at the person taking so long, and comments that they will start charging them rent. When the man comes out, he turns to glare at Phil, and he is one of the satanic murderers. Ed and Henry watch Valeria dance amongst the live band and drums. Henry says to Ed that he should invite Valeria to Palo Alto, but Ed tells Henry that he is not even going to college there because he didn't send the reply letter back. Phil walks up to Ed and Henry and tells them he is going to go and give the teddy bear he won to the prostitute he met at the strip club. The boys both tell Phil not to leave. Phil says he is like a fifth wheel and wants to go. He will catch a cab and catch up with them later. Henry starts talking to Felipe while she is doing his palm reading. Ed and Valeria run around together through a graveyard, laughing. When they stop at a nice monument with candles, they kiss. Phil is walking alone back to the strip club with the teddy bear tucked in his arms. He moves nervously, like he is feeling overwhelmed. A short man walks out of an alleyway and asks him for a lighter for his cigarette. Phil nervously lights his cigarette for him, and the man thanks him. Suddenly overwhelmed from the mushrooms he took, Phil leans forward then squats down, and the man tells him that he doesn't look so good. The man makes a signal to a car waiting up the road, which drives closer. He offers Phil a drive home, and Phil looks warily at the occupants in the car, but says nothing at first. The man keeps encouraging him, and he gets in the car. He sits uncomfortably, until the man in the driver's seat, the guy he got annoyed with at the public toilets, turns around and smiles at him. Philip says he changes his mind, and will walk instead, and goes to open the car door, but the two men in the car hold him back and put a plastic bag over his head as he screams. The next morning, Ed wakes up and wakes Henry up, who had fallen asleep holding a bottle of alcohol in the bathtub. He tells Henry that Phil didn't make it back last night. Henry won't wake properly, and asks for 10 more minutes, but Ed turns the shower on him, startling him awake. Henry talks excitedly about Ed having sex with Valeria with no protection. Ed says that's why he doesn't use mushrooms, as he is usually more careful. They wait in the lobby of the hotel they were staying at, and Henry wonders why Phil is taking so long when he knew they wanted to leave early. Phil is tied up, unable to move. A man named Randall acts eager and excited around him, offering him water and lets him know he will meet Papa soon and he will love him. He lets him know that if he needs anything like food or water, he will get it for him. He also tries to find a TV to set up for him and walks out. Phil yells out and asks him who they are and what he is doing there. Ed and Henry go to the police station and try telling the policeman that Phil is missing. Another man is trying to get in to speak to officers, saying they need to look at his evidence. He is allowed in and tells the police officer that grave diggers had stolen a child's body and they were preparing for Santalin's arrival for Nganga. Santalin is a worshipper of Nganga and leader of the Vargas cartel. Ed and Henry finally speak to an English-speaking police officer who says there is nothing he can do until their friend is missing for 72 hours. and tells them not to worry. Phil tries to make conversation with Randall to keep him talking, as he sets up the TV for him. He tries to offer him money from his parents if he lets him call them. Randall tells him that it is not about money, it's about the spirits. That Papa uses people to connect to spirits. Randall leaves Phil alone and walks out. Phil calls out to Randall and tells him he needs to go to the toilet. Randall comes out, and then Phil tells him he needs his pants undone too, which Randall whines about. As Randall is undoing his pants, Phil headbutts Randall as hard as he can, which knocks Randall to the ground, grabbing his nose. Phil then runs outside and tries to see where to run. His hands are still tied, but they are in front of him, so he can still run well. He hides around a corner and sees a man come out of a bus with a lasso. Phil runs until he finds a sandy ditch to hide in, but is horrified to see arms and legs of dead people half sticking out of the sand. He runs through the bushes and sees people downhill. Phil runs to them, but they don't stop. He runs after them along the sandy road, and then he hears the sound of horse hooves approaching behind him. The long-haired man lassos Phil, and he hits the ground. The man drags Phil along the ground, with the rope tied around his wrists. When he gets back into the shed, Randall punches him hard and tells him that if he ever does that again, he will kill him. He then tells him he has lost his television privileges and shoots the TV. Meanwhile, Ed, Henry, and Valeria visit Lupe, and she tells them the drug runners on the farm follow a religion that uses spiritual darkness to achieve their goals, and their priest is named Santolin. Lupe said that 2 of the followers were in her store a week ago, and she heard them saying that they were looking for a gringo. Lupe looks at them seriously and tells them that if Santolin took their friend, there is nothing that they can do. Henry is frustrated and asks Lupe if she means to say that they should just bail on their friend. Lupe looks at Henry and tells him that people like that tell you that their soul is dead and are proud of it. They are capable of anything. Lupe looks out of her shop window after helping a customer and gasps. Henry runs over and sees it's the cult followers who have been stalking them in the Jeep. Henry becomes angry and storms out of the store, and Ed follows behind him, warning him to stop. Henry says the police are useless and reaches in his boot for a metal pole. He tells Ed he is a chicken and that he is tired of being jerked around. He marches right up to the Jeep and smashes the headlight and yells at the driver. The man gets out. He is the driver who took Phil away, and he gets out a gun and shoots Henry in the neck. Henry falls to the ground, groaning in pain. Then, the cult follower walks right up close as Henry is on his knees and aims the gun between his eyes, goes to shoot, but there is no bullet in the chamber. He looks down at the gun, and police enter the road they are on. Ed desperately tries to flag down the police, but then the police car turns around and continues on down the next road. Ed yells out, confused about where the police are going. The cult follower tries again, but the chamber is empty again, so he hits Henry across the face with his gun, gets back into his Jeep, and takes off. In the hospital, Henry tells Ed and Valeria that he was very lucky. If it had been a tiny bit over, he would have been dead. Henry tells them that he told the doctor everything about Santolin, and he handed Henry a special rosary bead for protection. Santolin shows up to the farm where Phil is tied up. He walks up to him and sees the cut on his face from Randall. He asks Phil who did that to him, and then Phil looks at Randall. Santolin walks up to Randall and threatens him that if he touches Phil again, he will decorate his bedroom walls with his skin. Randall looks down and nods. Back at the hospital, Rodriguez, who had been spying on the cult at the farm, hears Ed and Henry talking, and Henry said to Ed that Phil is dead. Rodriguez tells them that he has seen Phil and that he is alive. Santolin comes back today and usually does his rituals tonight. He tells them that they should go to the FBI and tell them their story and show them his evidence. But Ed says there is not enough time if they are doing the ritual with Phil tonight. So Rodriguez tells them that he will go to the farm and do what he can, and that he will meet them at his hotel in an hour. Rodriguez goes to his hotel and collects his gun with extra ammo and bullets. Ed and Henry talk in their hotel room, and Ed suggests that they should go with Rodriguez. Henry tells Ed he is too frightened and that he is sorry for calling Ed a chicken before. Ed pats Henry on the shoulder and tells him he is going to drop Valeria off and then come back. Lupe goes to her store at night and locks the door behind her, but as she reaches her bedroom, she sees there is a dead goat's head on her bed. She turns to get out of there in shock and bumps into one of the cult members standing near the doorway. Ed drops Valeria home and suggests she comes with them, but she says she can't. Ed reluctantly says okay, and then tells her he will be back when he knows what's going on. Valeria gets out of the car and goes upstairs, and Ed lights a cigarette before he leaves. He takes a drag, when suddenly he hears Valeria screaming from upstairs. He gets out of the car and runs to help her. He runs up the stairs to see Valeria in the corner, and on the bed is her dead cousin Lupe, with her head chopped off and a goat's head on top, lying on the bed with blood everywhere. Valeria is screaming hysterically, and Ed holds her to comfort her and gets her out of the room. Back at the hotel, Henry is taking some painkillers and looking at his neck in the mirror. The lights go out, and he turns around, wondering what is happening. Henry goes downstairs to the lobby and notices all the power is out at the hotel. He walks back upstairs, and the 2 cult members enter the lobby and follow him up the stairs with large knives in their hands. He realizes he is being followed as 3 men show up down the other end of the corridor. He runs back and sees the 2 on the stairs and runs up and down, banging on the hotel room doors, begging someone to open. One lady opens her door with a door chain, and he tells her to open the door as they will kill him. He kicks open the door and locks it. The cult members all bang on the door and hit it with their blades. He runs to the back of the apartment and breaks a window, and then climbs out and tries to climb up the pipework. The cult members reach through the window, and one cuts him on the back of his leg as he climbs up. He reaches the roof, but there are cult members after him from every side. He picks up a metal pipe and swings it at them as they try to cut him. He gets cut a few times and falls to the ground. One bigger man says to stop and pulls him up by his hair and cuts his right arm off at his elbow. He screams in pain, and they slash him more. Ed arrives at the front of the hotel with Valeria and hugs her as she cries for Lupe. When they look over, they see police cars and an ambulance out the front of the hotel. Ed runs over to them. Rodriguez is there, and Ed asks in a panic if it's Henry. He says yes, he is on the roof, and Ed runs off without waiting as Rodriguez calls out to warn him that he won't want to see him. He gets to the roof, and the ambulance worker unzips the black bag to show him Henry. He is dead and covered in blood. Ed breaks down crying, and Rodriguez says he must leave now. Ed says he wants to come with him to the farm, and Rodriguez says that was not the deal. Ed tells him that's his friend, and he wants to save him. Ed and Rodriguez arrive near the farm, and Rodriguez gets his weapons ready. Ed wants to help, and Rodriguez asks if he has fired a gun before, which he has, and would shoot a man if he had to. Phil is unchained from where he has been kept, and taken to the ritual shed where Santalin enters, and is being filmed as lots of people stand in a circle with their heads down. He approaches the lady standing at the altar, and asks if everyone is there because it's time to begin. They unchain his arms, and then Phil runs. But all the people present push him back in the middle of the shed. Santalin walks over to him, and chops right through his bone on his leg. Phil screams in agony, and lays on the ground, reciting the shepherd's prayer from the Book of Psalms. Santalin talks over him with his own prayer to Nganga. Then he leans down to Phil, and bites his tongue off, stands up with blood pouring down, and then kisses his female offsider. He orders his followers to string him up. Phil is yelling out in pain and crying. Rodriguez sneaks up the stairs unsighted, and heads up to where Santalin is having a bath and being bathed by two women. Ed and Valeria hide on the other side of the kitchen as a woman prepares something. Something is brought into the kitchen under a cloth. The bald cult member lifts it up, revealing Phil's head. Ed almost vomits and stops himself from making any noise. Valeria pulls him back into the room and shuts the door closed so no one can hear them. Ed is rippling from anger and sadness. Rodriguez walks into the bathroom where Santalin is being bathed. He has his eyes shut, and the two women freeze having seen Rodriguez. He motions with his shotgun for them to move away, and he walks right up to Santalin. Santalin opens his eyes, and they widen in surprise. Rodriguez reminds him of a year ago in Mexico City, where he killed Rodriguez's partner but let him live. Santalin smirks and realizes he is one of the police. He stands up and tells him to shoot him if he has the will. One of the women comes behind him and stabs him in the back with a sharp instrument. He shrugs her off, slamming her into the wall, and she gets knocked unconscious. He shoots Santalin twice in the chest. Santalin falls to the floor. Rodriguez heads back down the stairs, and a cult member comes at him, but he shoots him dead. Rodriguez meets Ed and Valeria at the bottom of the stairs, and they help him walk out. They head outside and towards the caravan, and Rodriguez tells the others to get lost, or he'll shoot. Ed and Valeria get into the van and put Rodriguez in the back. Randall and some others shoot at them, but Valeria starts the van and takes off down the road. In the back of the van, Ed is telling Rodriguez to hold, and Rodriguez asks Ed that he promises he will tell Rodriguez's story. Ed nods and promises he will. They turn up at a small house, and a man walks out the front door. They tell him Rodriguez has been shot and asks for his help. He motions for them to come in, and they lay Rodriguez on the bed, but he dies. Ed tries to resuscitate Rodriguez, but he is unable to. Everything is quiet, and Ed goes out, but he notices Randall and the others have arrived, so he runs to the back of the house with Valeria and hides. Randall yells out to them that they killed a great man, a god. They have a bunch of weapons and little to lose. Ed puts some heavy drawers in front of the doors, and then goes back out the front to make sure things are locked. Randall is out the front, and Ed shoots at him, but misses. The bald man attacks Ed with a machete, and Ed fights back, but the man pins him down and then lifts the machete to kill him, but a bullet goes straight into his head. He falls to the ground, and Ed sees it was Valeria who killed him. She does the cross symbol over her chest. Ed fights another cult member, and Randall finds Valeria and attacks her. She bites and kicks him, causing him to drop his gun. Meanwhile, Ed fights the cult member and ends up choking him to death with some rope. He makes it outside, and Valeria runs away from him, but then Randall catches up with Valeria and fights her. He puts the gun in her mouth and says he likes to see people's faces before he kills them. Ed comes from behind and hits him on the head with the machete. Randall lifts his hat off, and blood pours down his head. Ed chops him again with the machete, and then continues to hack at him, yelling in anger until he is dead. Both Valeria and Ed sit up against the house exhausted and cry. Ed gets up and runs through the house with the machete. There is only one cult member left, and he is the one that pretended to need a lighter to get Phil's attention. Ed sees him, and the man freezes, saying he does not want to fight. He begs him not to hurt him, and then runs to the van and gets in. Ed catches up with him and pulls him out of the van and onto the ground. The man lies there, begging him not to kill him, but Ed has no mercy left for what they did to his innocent friends. He chops him once with the machete, and it kills him. He looks over at Valeria, who is beside herself in shock and horror, and he drops the machete. He kneels in utter mental and emotional exhaustion and trauma. 4 kilos of uncut cocaine were discovered by Mexican authorities, alongside cauldrons containing clumps of human hair. One cult member was caught running a police blockade. When questioned, he stated that human sacrifice and the power of the Nganga had rendered him invisible. Over 50 bodies were exhumed from a mass grave on the ranch property. Their brains and spinal cords had been removed. While crossing the Rio Grande, Ed and Valeria were apprehended and questioned by U.S. authorities. Several members are still at large, and the case remains open to this day.